Okay, so I'm trying something new today. I'm using a Zoom meeting to put together this video, and the reason I'm doing that is to be able to show some visuals by sharing my screen, because my topic today is about attractors. And attractors result in fractal entities, and those cannot be explained very well without actually showing you some examples of them. And all of this comes from the chaos theory, the theory of dynamics, or study of dynamics, which first emerged from attempts to predict the weather back in the 60s. I won't go into the complete history of that, but and at this point, I have to bring up again the idea that I am a student and I am sharing what I'm learning, because it has taken me a long time to come to where I can make this video because I've been such a perfectionist about it. And I found that to really do the subject justice, I would have to study dynamics and partial differential equations and vector fields for probably a year to be able to really speak with any authority on this subject. So I've already recorded a version of this video and I was dissatisfied with it. I watched it back and figured out so many other things that I should be including. So I'll just have to leave the perfectionism behind and get it done. So the first thing I'll do is show you some of the visuals. Okay, so after a little bit of a rough transition, here is our first image. This is chaos, a chaotic system. What is it about life that causes it to both seem so chaotic and yet at the same time it has an underlying order? And what I'm starting to learn about is that there is a concept, an entity known as an attractor. And this is an image of what happens to a very complicated and chaotic system when it has an attractor within it. Now, this particular image is called a Lorentz attractor, named after the guy that first found chaos theory as he was trying to study weather patterns in the 1960s. So instead of the crazy, unpredictable system that you had in the last image, this system has at least some order to it. And that order comes from these 2 points, these 2 equilibrium points that cause the state of the system to rotate around them. There still is a lot of chaos in what exact path this system will take, but it's roughly organized into these circular patterns. There are other attractors that will create fractal structures, such as this, a beautiful structure. Kind of looks like a snowflake. And this is an animation of an attractor in action. It's sort of a three-dimensional image of what is called the Sierpinski triangle. That is a fractal structure. Notice these blue dots that are appearing one by one within this tetrahedron. Here at the beginning, they seem to be very random. But as the clock ticks and each point appears, you see the pattern. Look, there's small tetrahedrons within the large tetrahedron. And within each of these small tetrahedrons are many other small tetrahedrons. If you zoom in, you'll see smaller and smaller and smaller detail, more refined detail. And yet the pattern within it will remain the same. So this is an attractor in action. You don't see the attractor, you see the result of its function. This is the two-slit experiment. This is the detection screen of the two-slit experiment in quantum mechanics as you shoot a particle through the two slits at the screen, one particle at a time. This pattern appears pretty random. But as the experiment progresses, as the clock ticks, you see the pattern. It is a wave pattern, an interference pattern. And this is what shows us the particle-wave duality in quantum mechanics. I believe that, like the last image, this too is an attractor in action. Here's the Sierpinski triangle being built in 2 dimensions. And the Sierpinski triangle is an interesting fractal object in that it seems to contain within it the code for creation of trees, plants, the nervous system, the circulatory system. It seems like these fractal structures and the attractors behind them serve as a blueprint for creation, a blueprint for the natural world. The Mandelbrot set is a beautiful image, a fractal image that arises from a parameter and putting a point onto the complex plane. And it's nonlinear, just like most of nature. I have a lot to learn about the Mandelbrot set still, and further details will come in further videos. But for now, let's zoom in on the detail. There's a lot more detail than initially meets the eye. And I found an image of zooming in on the Mandelbrot set further. And you get an idea of how incredibly detailed this thing is and how much information it can contain. Galaxies are fractal structures, as is the behavior of water as it goes down the drain. Seems that the attractor for a galaxy is the supermassive black hole at its center. I suspect that atomic structure also follows the blueprint of its own attractor, as we saw in the two-slit experiment, but also the Schrödinger solution, or the Schrödinger equation solutions in 3 dimensions that give us these atomic orbitals for higher and higher energy levels in the atom. Oh. All right, give me a second here. There we are. Okay. Well, as atomic structure becomes more and more complicated and more elements become evolved, it seems that there is an attractor that can guide the positioning of these atoms and molecules into a very complicated molecule, DNA. A molecule capable of containing the entire code to create a human being. The entire code to create a brain cell, this neuron. And within the neuron, we see the cell structure. We have the microtubules, which are quantum objects. Some say that these microtubules are the actual home of consciousness and the origin of consciousness. Of course, my suspicion at this point that it goes much deeper than that. But we see this attraction structure in that we have a central nucleus with a protective membrane, and then we have the cytoplasm with the structure and function organized in such detail that it is alive, and that almost all of the time it functions perfectly. Not entirely perfectly. There are errors, and certainly I see those occurring, well, I guess in myself to some degree, but in patients that I've seen in the hospital. But it is incredible how well our cells function almost all of the time. And then we have this very complicated structure, the human brain, the mind. If you look at an electroencephalogram, an EEG, you get a sense of how complicated and seemingly chaotic the human brain is. But the structure is there, and we know that because we have thoughts. We can carry out actions. There is a discipline of psychology that is able to show us some structure to our thinking mind. So in making this video, I really had to abandon the idea of comprehensive education about these things, a comprehensive explanation. Uh, it would take really an entire course to make the deep dive into this subject matter. But I guess I will share some of the questions that came up for me as I rewatched my first attempt at this video. And how can life seem so chaotic, and yet nature has such an order to it? That question is what guided me to the subject of chaos theory and dynamics. And my guess is that nature, and within nature, the spiritual world, contains these blueprints, possibly in the form of attractors. And there is a definite beauty, not only in the images that I showed you, such as the Mandelbrot set, beautiful, but in nature itself. I've always loved the natural forest, but I don't get the same feeling if I'm walking around in a tree plantation where the trees are planted in rows. And I came to realize that the reason for that is that the natural forest follows a fractal structure. And that fractal structure contains the beauty that I feel. Yeah. So while going through the slides, I guess I tried to provide some answers to the way attractors can take atoms of carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, phosphorus, and a few others, hydrogen, and cause them to arrange themselves into something as complicated and powerful as a molecule of DNA. Atoms which would be just flying around randomly. With an attractor, something much greater than the sum of its parts can be created. Is this process still going on? I suspect that it is. I believe that we as beings are still evolving. The spiritual part of my studies suggests that we are ascending. Our bodies are ascending from purely biological to energy. In the spiritual circles, you hear about light bodies, energy bodies, where there isn't even any biological nature left. Seems that's where we're headed. I'm open to believing that as a possibility. I prefer it because it seems to me it's an optimistic one. Okay, another question that came up for me is these attractors. They seem to be quantum objects in that the information they contain is quantum. My speculation is that an attractor can be transmitted through quantum entanglement, and therefore is not subject to classical limitations such as speed of light. Suppose there are extraterrestrials all over the galaxy, all over the universe. Can they and we communicate with each other instantaneously by using attractors? I guess a way that might work would be to transmit, suppose some extraterrestrial wishes to communicate with me. Perhaps the attractor arrives in my mind and then guides the function of my mind to create ideas and thoughts, which would seem to be my ideas and thoughts, but perhaps they've come from elsewhere. Yeah, speculation. Woo-woo speculation. But I like the idea. I'm certainly excited to explore it more. Okay, the last idea I will share on this video is that attractors to me give me a lot of hope. In studying physics, fundamental physics, I come up against the second law of thermodynamics, which seems to require that disorder is inexorably increasing in our lives, and it sure seems that way. If you don't clean your house, it becomes a disordered mess. If you drop something, it breaks, and it's pretty hard to put it back together. Ultimately, the second law of thermodynamics seems to be leading to the heat death of the universe. But there is another side to that equation, and that is the presence of attractors. Attractors maintain order in the environment of chaos. They bring chaos into order. And I feel that something wonderful is being created in time that will transcend the second law of thermodynamics. The antidote to entropy is consciousness, right? If your house is becoming very messy, you clean it. That takes consciousness, and it reduces the entropy. Ultimately, the disorder of the universe increases according to the second law, but then again, there are other ways to get rid of the disorder. I talked a little bit about that in my video about black holes. But anyway, how long is this video getting to be? I guess I don't really see a timestamp on it, but that will be enough for now. I will be posting a mix of these Zoom meeting type videos versus the free talk videos that I usually post. So I hope to see you soon.